everybody. I am back. It's me, Puzzlebox. Also, with me is Bobby. Be
It-
fine.
It's me. What up?
Man, um, we're here with more Gretchen content because that's what we need on the channel. I think is more Gretchen content.
Number one Gretchen Stan account.
So today we're gonna be talking about specific cards from Gretchen. I looked at like the top 10 combo Gretchen deck lists by views on Moxfield, and I put just about every card that we've deemed relatively playable into this list. So we've got how many cards? 152 plus two cards that haven't released yet. So we're going to be talking about a lot of cards, and we're going to be making a tier list, quote unquote, of cards and their playability in Gretchen specifically in Pauper Commander.
Yeah, I
So
mean, there's a lot. You and I have the lists that differ a little bit. I mean, there have been lists that have top forward tournaments that have looked pretty different. There are lists that people just like played a lot that look different. So, uh, at the end of the day, I guess my disclaimer before we jump in, like, the cool thing about this deck is if you're playing like the core cards, or what we'll probably call like the S tier mandatory, that core group of just like the best cards, you can fill it in with a lot of like preferential stuff, and the deck will still do well. But um,
yeah,
yeah,
as long as you're playing the like best combo pieces and interaction, after that it's like do whatever you want. Honestly, the card's good. The combo line carries. You can do what you want with the tech options.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, on that front, I guess before we get started, I'll mention we have classified the deck, or not the decks, the cards into um, S tier, which is what we're considering mandatory cards that should be in almost, if not every single Gretchen list. We've got A tier, which is staples. So not quite S tier. They're not like you absolutely have to play this card if you're playing Gretchen, but you have to have a really strong justification to not play these cards. They are just generally very strong in Gretchen. Um, we've got B tier, which is just the solid cards, the strong options. These are cards that are either part of like an optional card package that is strong, but not a required package for Gretchen. A lot of these are in that kind of like they're strong options, and you'll definitely see builds playing them, but not every single build will play them. Um, we've got our C tier, which is the tech options, which are more meta dependent or like build dependent. There have been builds of Gretchen which are like turbo oriented, and some of these cards would see play there. Some builds that are even more heavily focused on a specific line of play. Some of those cards will end up here, life gain, stuff like that. And then we've got our D tier, which is just I wouldn't recommend playing them. Presumably, Bobby also just wouldn't recommend. I'm not going to speak for him, but
yeah.
um,
They're generally cards that like they may do well in other decks that aren't Gretchen, but Gretchen isn't really the home for them. Like they're not bad cards. Uh, they're just not meant for Gretchen, or they're not really in line with what Gretchen's trying to do. Is kind of how I would describe them.
there are a couple of cards in there that are pretty much only playable in Gretchen, but they're just not good enough.
Yeah.
Like one that I guess I can bring up like really early on is Floodbringer. One we have in here, like bouncing a land to hand is pretty much exclusively a Gretchen thing for a positive effect. But even in Gretchen, the card's just not that great. So
Yeah.
we have it down there. But cards like that.
But yeah.
I
So
think that covers the tiers, though.
yeah. So where do you want to dig in first here?
I suppose we can just start in our. So we did section the cards out by their general role, so that we can talk about them kind of clumped together. So I suppose we can just start in alphabetical order of the roles. Start at card advantage and work our way down.
Let's do it.
This is going to be a long one. So
Buckle in. But yeah, I guess so. Jumping into card advantage, the first card off the bat is Anticipate. There's a couple different copies of this card are functionally, identical or fairly similar versions. Um, I guess where do you land on this puzzle? I know I'm not the biggest fan of it.
yeah, so generally my thought whenever I was first building Gretchen and how I've kept it is I want to play as little like dedicated card advantage cards in the 99 as possible and really just lean on Gretchen for that card advantage. Um, and specifically anticipate if we compare it to some other cards we have in here, like Impulse, obviously. Anticipate is just strictly worse Impulse.
Yeah.
So it's still like fine. It's not a bad card. And put it in like C tier. It's not unplayable by any means, but
Yeah.
there are better options.
It's dig, so it can only be so bad when we're a combo deck. But the deck does a fine job of digging, right? And so you're gonna see, a handful of the cards in this section end up being in kind of that like C tier, maybe a little above, maybe a little below. But yeah, like you said, Gretchen does the digging for us. We don't have to do a lot of hard work there, and we have lots of tutors, so we don't even have to dig. We can just go find the pieces we need. So it doesn't make sense to dedicate too many slots to the dig itself.
Yeah, you still want a couple just in case Gretchen gets hit with an oubliette or something of that extent, you know? If you don't have the out in hand, it's nice to have the potential to kind of dig for those outs. But yeah, I'd put Anticipate in C.
Yeah. Next up, we have Behold the Multiverse. Kind of in line with that. It's not so much dig as much as card draw, so it's getting you card positive. Um, Again, like a solid card by all measures, but not, you're paying 4 mana to scry 2, draw 2, which on its face is, better than draw 1, put 1 into play, which is Gretchen's activated ability, but you're dedicating a card to it, right? Or, you can split it up and dedicate split the mana up with Foretell. So it's just basically another dig spell. It is card positive, but it's competing with a Gretchen activation. And the ramp aspect of Gretchen's activation is huge for the deck to the point where I think 9 times out of 10, I would rather activate Gretchen than cast Behold the Multiverse for 4.
Yeah, like the big thing about Gretchen activations is ramp, like you mentioned, but also like it's repeatable. And you don't have to dig for a Gretchen activation, right? Like I can activate Gretchen 7 times in a turn cycle if I have the mana. I'm casting Behold the Multiverse once. And yeah.
Yeah.
So probably C tier for this one as well. I think they're better card draw spells.
Yeah, agreed. And then next up, we have Benefaction of Ronus. I think we can also talk about Commune with the Gods at the same time as we talk about this card. So these are sorceries that reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You can get a creature or enchantment from them. Benefaction gives you a creature and or an enchantment. Commune only gets you 1. And then you put that one into your hand, the rest into the yard. Again, really solid, efficient dig spells in a deck where all of our combo pieces are creatures and enchantments. So does a really good job of digging. I know when we built our like jokey version of mono green or mono forest Gretchen, like the stocks on these went way up just because it became harder to play some of our like tutors and things that required like double blue, but they're fine. Like they're not exciting. I don't think they're super needed. If you want to build a more like graveyard focused, recursion focused version of the deck, which I think we've seen some variations on, I think they're completely defensible. But otherwise, they're just kind of, again, a little lackluster for like the bulk of Gretchen builds.
Yeah, it's an interesting avenue to explore, but I think Gretchen's just, again, that really strong option in the command zone makes it a little bit less enticing.
Yeah.
Um, so we go in C tier on this one as well,
Yeah.
which
Uh,
is going to be a common theme for most of these because, like we mentioned, Gretchen just doesn't need them as much as most other decks do.
yeah. These card advantage spells generally are just not what we're looking for. So, um, yeah. Next up, we have Brainstorm. Why don't you talk about Brainstorm?
Brainstorm kind of sucks. Not gonna lie. Um, so the thing about Brainstorm is that it is card neutral, right? You draw three, put two back on top, so you get +1 off of the card draw itself, but you used a card from your hand. So you're not netting any card advantage. Also, unless you're playing like fetch lands and stuff, it's kind of hard for Gretchen to shuffle the deck, especially early game. And more often than not, you're just going to be drawing back into those cards you already saw. So it's like you're not really gaining any card selection by reshuffling your deck or anything. It's just not really worth the card investment. The one mana is fine, but generally I feel like in a deck where you have as much mana as you tend to have in Gretchen, if you're gonna play card draw spells, you'll want something bigger than a brainstorm.
Yeah, and then, I mean, there are plenty of other decks in PDH that love cantrips. They love early spells. They love filling the yard, and just having spell cast triggers, whether it's with pingers or whatever. Crackling Drake, cares about having stuff in yard. Cantrips are never like they're not bad, but again, it's just not doing anything here. We don't have the tutors that some other. I mean, we have tutors, but we're not tutoring as much as some other combo decks are that may be able to better take advantage of Brainstorm. Um, so yeah, I just don't think it's a card I'm interested in playing to the point where I think it goes in D tier. Just this isn't really a card Gretchen needs to be playing. And they're just I mean, we talked about all those other dig options I think are just generally better. Um, if you want something like that that's just trying to, you know, get you some filtering going on.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Um, Next up is compulsive
Compulsive. Yeah.
research. All right. You want to take a lead on this one?
Yeah, so compulsive is a good card. We have lots of lands. We have ways to return lands to our hand. So normally it's a draw three, discard one. So it's card positive. It also has the added benefit of being a way to win the game. Um, a way to draw out our opponents once we've gone infinite. When you're capsizing Archaeomancer or using Mystic Sanctuary loops to recur a spell over and over again to ultimately kill our opponents. Uh, it's not the most exciting, but it's a cheap card positive card, which is a rarity in commons. So we don't have a ton of those. Um, and you can play it early in the game. It's generally fine, and then when it comes time to combo, it's there sitting waiting for you. I think I've moved away from it, but I played it early on in Gretchen. It's still completely defensible as a way to win. It's still completely fine. It's just a very solid card.
Where would you personally put it on the tier list?
Yeah, I think I have it in the B tier. Like it's it's gonna be played more often than a tech card or a meta dependent card because it's just a solid card. It's not gonna be your strongest win con because it does give opponents a chance to interact because they're drawing cards and you know they can mess with you. You should never have any concerns once you're at that point. But theoretically, it gives them a chance and ways to do things along the way. Um, I'm never normally excited about casting it outside of just you know um, when we're winning. So that's why it's not going in every Gretchen list. I don't think, but I would expect to see this card in probably the majority of Gretchen lists.
Yeah, I think B tier is about where I would put it. Honestly, it's the win con I go for most often because it's very easy to explain. And in this format, as long as you do like the capsize, bounce everything, go to main phase two, and empty their mana pools, there's nothing they can do. Like there's literally not an option in the format that does anything.
Yeah, people think there's. I mean, people who are uncomfortable with playing Gretchen and don't fully like know how all of your ways to like make sure you're protected from like graveyard hate and everything. Like you could walk yourself into a bind if you don't know how to like combat that and have the tools in your hand ready to combat that when you're going for it. But as long as you do the appropriate setup, it should be basically impossible to lose at that point.
Yeah, I don't think there's an out to Gretchen with infinite mana, deck in hand, and you have no permanents in play, no mana. There's no out.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I don't have an issue with casting the card just like on a value turn. It is sorcery speed, which is kind of annoying, but
Yeah.
I like compulsive.
Yeah, it's just competing with land auras and untappers at the 3-drop slot. So
Yeah,
early, it's not exciting, and mid to late game, you'd rather be activating Gretchen again. So it's just in an awkward spot, is all. So
yeah. I like it at 3/4 though, just because at 4 you're competing with the Gretchen activation.
yeah,
Whereas like if your hand's really bad and you have to go turn 2 Gretchen and find something to do on turn 3, I think compulsive is fine. Because that means you're probably flooded, so you probably have a land to discard.
100%. So yeah, B tier sounds good for me on that. Next up, we have consider. Maybe we want to talk about ponder, preordain too. These are all kind of similar
Yeah,
in
the 1
function.
mana cantrips.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I don't have much to add outside of what we talked about with brainstorm. They're very similar. These don't have the same like you're stuck drawing into whatever you saw issue that brainstorm has. Um, but they're just card neutral. They're okay on turn one, but outside of that, they're pretty like mediocre. Um, they're just not exciting when we could be playing more interaction and just more ramp, more draw, like more things to help us draw more cards with Gretchen. Um, just leaning into Gretchen as the draw engine and as the way to just see more cards. Um, you get to focus more on the game plan and focus on doing it well than like trying to sculpt awkwardly early and dedicating 1 mana, at different parts of the game just to like sort of move some cards around, but not in meaningful numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think ponder and preordain are better than consider for us
Yeah,
because we're not playing um, a lot of stuff that cares about the grave. If you're playing a really like recursion heavy build, maybe consider is worth considering. But honestly, I'd put consider in D and ponder and preordain and C tier probably because they do like look at multiple cards, which is nice,
yeah, I think that's about where I'm at on them as well. Um,
and give you the option to change those cards, which
yeah,
brainstorm does not.
yeah, that's the big difference there. You're not locked into the next few cards no matter what with those 2 cards. So, but yeah. Next up, deep analysis. Um,
Oh yeah.
I
Oh,
I guess I feel similarly to this like I do compulsive research. Um, the downside being it is 4 mana, so it is competing with that Gretchen slot for a +1. But once it's in your yard, it's a 2 mana +2 at that point because it's not in hand anymore. So it's neat. It fills the role of win con again, just like compulsive does. You can target opponents with it when you're comboing off. So still a very solid card. Um, where are you at with the puzzle?
yeah, I'm about the same. I like compulsive more personally, because as we mentioned, that 3-drop slot is not complete competing with Gretchen activation potentially. And also, if you do flashback deep analysis, then you can't use it as a win con, which, like,
True.
obviously, modality is good. It's objectively a good thing that you have the option to flash it back. But if you do, you're removing a potential win con. Not that we don't have a million other win cons.
Yeah, but it is just something you have to like then be mindful of moving forward because you can walk yourself into a spot where you also cast compulsive and then like you're getting into like the trickier ways to win the game depending on how your deck's built out. So, um,
But yeah, the card advantage on this thing, if you do hard cast it and flash it back, or mill it and flash it back, is very nice.
yeah.
I think it's a very reasonable card. B tier probably for me.
Yep. Same with me. Basically on par with compulsive research, about the same in my eyes. So, um, next up we have frantic search. How do you feel about frantic search puzzle?
So frantic search is a card that's like really high rolly, right? In the games where you are like hitting turn one Utopia Sprawl, turn two uh, extra land enchantment into a land untapper or something insane like that. Um, the card selection plus untapping your lands and going positive is insane. When this card is a ritual, it's broken. Which is pretty true of most cards that untap lands in this
Yeah.
deck. But this deck only has three land enchantments that you could possibly play on turn one or two. Um, so this isn't like a ritual on turn three very often. It's usually only a ritual turn four, five, six. And after that, you don't even really want to be casting it because your Gretchen's online. Um, and this is card disadvantage. It goes card neutral in the card draw, and you lose the card itself.
Yeah.
So
I think if
yeah,
you
I think it's for the turbo builds and
yeah,
not much else.
if you want to do like the all in turbo, like throw everything out early, it's fine. That's not how I prefer playing the deck. It's not how you prefer playing the deck, I know. Um, but some people enjoy it, and the deck can do that too. Um, but yeah, I just don't think we're able to take advantage of it as as best as other decks can. Maybe decks that like run flicker wizards and all that stuff. So I put this in like the C tier. Like you'll see it in some lists, and those lists will be a little more built around it. Um, but it's
Yeah,
not
I think
like
I
us.
was on it in the old builds, but I've moved away from it.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, it can definitely do its thing. It's just not that exciting to me. So
Yeah,
next up, Jataxian Probe. How do
yeah.
you feel
So
about Jataxian Probe?
probe is a little bit different from the other cantrips because you're not dedicating a resource to do it in terms of mana, so it's free. And the secondary effect of looking at a player's hand is probably the most impactful effect on any of the one mana cantrips. So being free and getting to look at a player's hand are both extremely valuable, and it just replaces itself. So like this card's good. Um, Even in Gretchen, I struggled to like. I don't think I'm on this card in my current list, but I absolutely do not fault anyone for playing G Probe ever.
Yeah, I'm on it right now. Whenever I'm playing a blue combo deck, I have to have a pretty good reason not to run Probe. It's essentially a free card. It gives you free information early or when you're about to go for a combo, so it's good early or late. Or to feel out what's going on at the table. It's solid. Like it's like almost like running one less card in your deck. That gives you a little bit of information. When it does show up. So I think it's very solid. I think I have it in like A tier. It's not like an auto include, but I would probably do my best to find room for it if I could.
Yeah, I think it's A tier. I think my struggle with it is just finding room, like you mentioned. Like, I'd rather just have the redundancy and consistency. Like,
Yeah.
Gretchen just has so many options. But, yeah, this card's very strong.
Yeah. Next up, we have Gush. You like this card a lot more than I do, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gush is kind of broken in Gretchen, to be honest. So the thing with Gretchen and Gush is obviously returning two islands to hand is not that big of a cost in Gretchen because we have the ability to just put those lands back into play with our activations. And if you're returning two islands just straight up with nothing else going on, you still float that two blue first, and that pays for half of a Gretchen activation to put one of those lands back into play. And it's actually a card positive card, um, unless you count the bouncing as disadvantage, which I don't in Gretchen specifically.
Yeah.
Also, if you have a high tide, then this card is mana neutral. If you're putting both of those, or not mana neutral, but like it gets 4 mana off those two islands, and then you just have to find a green source to activate Gretchen, which puts that land back into play and taps for an extra two. So it almost becomes a weird ritual in a way that draws a lot more cards. It's insane with a high tide. You can use it for Mystic Sanctuary shenanigans. I really like Gush.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so, like, for me, I think it's B tier because it still takes some of those synergy requirements, but I think the ceiling on it is really high.
The ceiling is high, the floor is pretty low also, like it's underwhelming, if it's really good late game or when you have high tide, but like when you're not in that point, like hard casting it feels bad. 5 minute draw two. It's not the worst, but it's not exciting, right? The returning islands isn't a huge downside. But like we talked about earlier, like we just don't need a lot of like card advantage spells in the deck really with what Gretchen's doing. So that's why I'm lower on it. It's definitely a good card. It's busted in plenty of decks. Like it's even more busted in Tadiova, for example, right?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
so I would never say Gush is not a powerful, busted magic card. I'm just not the most excited about it in this deck specifically. So I have it more in like the C range. Like, if you want your deck to be more about it, you can. I'm not on it currently, but it's completely defensible and like if that's
Yeah,
what you
and
want to
I'm
do.
fine with it being in the C range. Like, I think that's reasonable. I think I'm just really attached to the card.
That's fair.
But
Um, but yeah, next up, Impulse. We kind of talked about this already with Anticipate. So it's just strictly better Anticipate. Digs one deeper. Um, there's not much to say. Again, just another dig spell. It's an instant, so it's better than the green ones. I think it's the best of these types of spells, in terms of being instant speed, being 2 mana, and digging deepest. So for that reason, it probably is like to me, a tier higher in like the B tier as compared to the other ones.
I think I'm actually playing Impulse, and I'm not playing the other 2 mana ones, Anticipate and Shimmer of Possibility.
Yeah, and Shimmer's sorcery speed, right? So it kind of gets knocked
Yeah.
down a peg. Talking about that one too. So I think Impulse is fine. Not the most exciting card, again, but it's of all of the dig spells that are there, it's probably the most powerful for what Gretchen's trying to do. Um, so kind of in like
Yeah,
that B tier range is where I'm at on it.
I agree.
Nice.
Um,
Um,
Lorien revealed. Big Gush. Uh, 5 mana draw 3 instead of 5 mana draw 2. But you don't get to cast it for free. Instead, you get the option to Island Cycle, which can find your basics, your dual lands, which is relevant in this deck, and also Mystic Sanctuary, which is obviously relevant
yeah,
because it's a blue deck that is land based.
yeah, I think it's good. I like it. Of all of the dig spells we talked about so far, I like it the most out of all of them. I've cast it more than my fair share of times. I've also island cycled with it plenty of times. It's very strong. Uh, if it was just a 5 mana draw three with no island cycling, I would not care about this card at all. But the fact that it finds Mystic Sanctuary or your dual land is huge, 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 huge. Um, so yeah, for that reason, I'm all about it. I think it's an A, right? I don't think it's an auto include necessarily. You definitely don't need it for the deck to function, but it's just so strong, and the floor on it is so high that it's hard to justify not playing it.
Yeah, like the ceiling is still relatively high with 5 mana draw three. Like that's still good. But yeah, the floor being tutor a land is that's a pretty good floor.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty hard to argue against this card.
yeah. So yeah, kind of you're thinking A tier
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, A tier is totally good with me.
Gotcha.
Um,
So we already talked about Ponder, Preordained, Shimmer, Tragic Lesson. So this is another one where I think you're more excited about the card than I am. So I'll let you go off.
yeah, this is another one of the like the synergy draw cards where you get a draw two and then discard unless you bounce a land. Which again, like bouncing a land just isn't really a downside. So I see this more as like an instant speed divination, which is still like okay. It's not insane or anything, but I do really like I like game states late game where the bouncing a land is a benefit because you can loop this card with Mystic Sanctuary. I have had games that I've won where I get stuck with a handful of interaction, Tragic Lesson, and Mystic Sanctuary, and during the end phase of the turn cycle, it's Tragic Lesson, um, using the Mystic Sanctuary for the mana, obviously, with some other mana source. Bounce the Mystic Sanctuary, activate Gretchen, get another card, put the Sanctuary into play, Tragic Lesson back on top, draw it for turn, and you just start looping Sanctuary with Tragic Lesson, and it's fine. Um,
Yeah,
it's not what you want to be doing, obviously, but I do think it's playable for exactly those situations.
it's a really good spell for when your Gretchen gets locked out away from you, whether under an oubliette or witness protection or something, and you haven't found the way out of it yet. Again, it's like in that gush category for me, where like the card is good. I think it's way better in like a deck like Tadiova again, where it's doing even more busted things. But it's completely fine. I've kind of moved away from it, but I played it a lot earlier builds of Gretchen. So the deck is or card is good. I have it in like the C again, kind of with Gush, where you can build around it. It's defensible, but it's kind of like a preferential uh, decision at that point, like what you like.
Yeah, I think it is like a bit worse than Gush, honestly. So I think C tier is fair. Um, I like it, but probably C tier.
Yeah. And then the last one on our card advantage section, Treasure Cruise. This card's obviously good. It's banned places, it's restricted places. Like, card's nuts. Um, but not in this deck. We're not taking advantage of the graveyard. We've already talked about how we're not running cantrips. We're not doing the mill thing. We're not really doing the things that make Treasure Cruise good. And what makes Treasure Cruise good is it not costing 8 mana. Um, I don't think. I mean, it's hard enough getting Crows and Restorers threshold a lot of the time. Um, so I'm at like getting to that point just to then eat it all away with a Treasure Cruise is also not the most exciting premise. For that reason, I just am never ever gonna play it in Gretchen. I have it in like the D tier. It's just not what we're doing. Maybe if you build a graveyard like base version with all those like green, you know, dig spells, it's more defensible. But even then, I'm just not excited about it.
Yeah, I mean I started with this card in the list a while ago because it's Treasure Cruise, right? And yeah, the more I played it, I was like, this card just like you don't get to cast it for one as much as you want to, and Gretchen. The way I like to play Gretchen, at least, is not playing dedicated win condition cards that do nothing else but win. I like to play cards like the compulsive research and just end up looping cards that are good on their own. And if you have to banish 7 cards, you lose potentially some of those win conditions, and it can get awkward for you to win. Um, so yeah, I think Treasure Cruise has some weird conflictions, and I would also put it into D tier.
Yeah. But yeah, so that kind of wraps up the card advantage card selection category. Now we get to go to like the fun part, which is the combo enablers. Um,
Yeah,
the first one, you may be wondering, what is this doing here? Which is kind of where I think we land on it too. Careful cultivation, and it's probably important to talk about Pillow Pala here at the same time.
yeah,
Um,
it's a
that
package. So.
Yeah, so that package obviously it generates infinite mana. It's great. It's 2 cards, um, but they're 2 cards that don't do anything else with anything else we're doing in the deck. So, to that end, not particularly exciting. Um, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it has the haste problem where or the summoning sickness problem rather, where you have to give it haste to like get it through like without because once a person sees Pillow Pala, they know what you're trying to do. There's no one's using Pillow Pala in a fair way. Um, everyone, every time I've ever seen it's to do something combo-y. So you're not going to be able to like sneak it by anyone. And these cards like they just don't do anything outside of comboing those two together. And the deck is just so redundant in all the other pieces that it's doing. Like putting in this like random 2 card combo that doesn't mesh well is just not where I think the deck needs to go, or should go.
yeah, I agree. There's not much reason to play Pili Pala because it's an artifact or because it's 2 CMC or anything like that. We have other targets for those options. Um, and cultivation is just an aura, which so are all of our land enchantments. So I don't see a reason to be playing this card uh, personally. So D tier for me.
Yeah. So next up, Displace. We can probably talk about like we have them down in another section, but it probably merits talking about why Displace is here. So Displace, Ghostly Flicker, and then Cloud of Fairies and Peregrine Drake, along with a Recursion Wizard like Archaeomancer.
Yeah, the flicker combo.
Yeah. So this deck isn't like the worst deck for Flicker combo, admittedly. When you're untapping lands, you need them to go mana positive. Our lands are all enchanted, so that's cool. But the cards don't do anything outside of things. Like they're not the untappers in this deck are generating you mana every turn, which allows you to activate Gretchen every turn, and it's awesome. The Cloud of Fairies and Peregrine Drake are more like rituals in that regard. One time, a little bit extra mana. They don't really stick around very well because people are terrified the second they see them. And so, looking at these 2 cards, the enabler pieces of those, the Displace and Ghostly Flicker, we just don't have ways to take advantage of them if you're not running that combo. The deck doesn't run a lot of ETB dudes. It runs a lot of untappers that just are meant to sit and play and sit and play and sit and play. Ghostly Flicker does have like a little bit of an added like utility because we're running Mystic Sanctuary and it can target lands. So like there are like if you're running it, you can maybe do some high tide lines that are neat. That don't require running cards that wouldn't normally be in like the list. But generally speaking, you're not going to see Flicker in most Gretchen lists just because it kind of has the careful cultivation problem of the combo is like fairly compact, but it just doesn't mesh well with what the rest of the deck is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, like the untappers provide that long game kind of value that we're looking for. They do something every turn they're in play. Whereas the flicker package is more for winning on the spot when no one's really ready for it, finding that opening to just jam the win in, which is not generally what we're looking to do in Gretchen, at least in our builds.
Yeah.
So, um, Yeah, I know you mentioned Flicker is a bit better because it can potentially be a one card quote unquote line with Sanctuary and High Tide. You would have to High Tide what, twice?
2 times to go even, and then a third to go
Well, if
infinite.
you High Tide twice, yeah, then you're going even, but you're putting a land into play every time from your hand, so it's like
Yeah.
kind of advantage. And then yeah, three times to like actually go infinite.
So yeah, not the worst, but again, just not like you'd have to build the deck pretty differently, I think, to really take full advantage of that. And I think by doing that, you're taking away from one of the strongest parts of the deck, which is just the sheer amount of redundancy we have in all the like important combo pieces. So,
Yeah, so I'd put Flicker in C tier because it can at least do something, and
yeah,
then the rest of the Flicker package is probably in D tier.
yeah, that's where I'm at too. So, yeah, next up, Freed from the Real.
S
Uh,
tier, baby.
yeah, this is about as easy of a card to put in S tier as possible. It's the most efficient of the win con, untapper land like guy untappers. You only need a land that taps for blue and at least another blue or green. Um, Hopefully more, but it's the easiest one to get set up. It's not the cheapest one, but it's the cheapest one to activate. And it's on, it's tutorable with all of our Aura tutors. I guess the one Aura tutor and at the 3 CMC slot. So, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean it's the most efficient one in
yeah,
terms of the activation cost, which is what we really care about, because
yeah,
that's what determines how much mana you have to generate per loop.
yeah,
The actual casting cost is whatever.
yeah.
You know,
Just changes which tutor lines we have available for it, but yeah, no, easy S tier. There's really not a lot to say about it. It's good. It's like the combo card of the deck. So
yeah, that's the reason you're playing Gretchen.
yeah,
Uh, Galvanic Alchemist.
yeah. So this is in the same vein. It's another guy on Tapper. Same CMC, slightly more tutorable, with the addition of wizard cyclers, which is cool. Um,
Hmm.
it also has some cool things about if you have multiple untappers and a land that lets you go infinite. Um, Soul Bond is really tricky for people to play around when you're doing it. Because you don't have to finish declaring. You don't have to pick what's soul bonded to until the trigger resolves. So people can't just like pick on the one thing you want to pair it to, knowing you have another untapper. So it has some cool corner cases that come up that give it some cool stuff. It's strong. It's super tutorable. Um, the 3 mana activation is on the steeper end of things. It takes a land to produce 4 mana to go infinite. So that's not like a low, it's not something that's the easiest to achieve, but the deck is centered around doing it, right? So, um, all in all, I think it's in that A tier. Like, you probably should be playing it. It's You'll have times where you have to still work to get it set up, but we only have so many of these effects that repeatedly untap our creatures, so we kind of get locked into playing them all.
Yeah, I mean, we still have more redundancy than pretty much every other combo deck in the format.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, like Galvanic has so many upsides that it really makes up for the downside of the 3 cost to activate. Like you mentioned, the non-targeting for Soul Bond comes up, especially because this creature has 4 toughness, so
it's huge.
it's not boltable,
Yeah,
which means that the Soul Bond comes up in situations where you're playing into a bolt and you have 2 untappers. They can't just bolt one. Um, and if yeah, like if it resolves, then as soon as they try to bolt, it's already resolved. You can just untap in
untap it in
response and
response. Yeah,
do the thing. So it does like actually come up,
yeah,
which is really neat. And yeah, I think it's A tier.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Really good. Next up, we already talked about Ghost Figure, so High Tide. Um, we play lots of islands. You know, we want our lands tap for multiple mana. It just makes sense. It's similar to our land auras in lots of ways, but it can enable some wins that are maybe like unexpected or out of nowhere. It enables some funny stuff with Snap and Ghostly Flicker, like we talked about too. Gush, you know, if you're playing those cards. Um, yeah. What else do you have to say about High Tide?
It does still have the issue that High Tide has inherently, in that it also increases the mana potential of your opponent's islands. So I don't think this card is ever like S tier, because blue's pretty popular and a pretty powerful interaction color. Um, but it is pretty much always going to be better for you than it is for your opponents when you're casting it, obviously. It can be a little awkward in Gretchen because you are a two-color deck that like actually cares about having forests because you play Utopia Sprawl and some other cards like that. But all in all, still a very powerful card. Tutorable with Merchant Scroll and Dizzy Spell. Pretty much your only Dizzy Spell target that's relevant for combo turns. So,
Yeah.
yeah, A tier probably. Pretty hard to cut.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Next up is Immobilizing Ink. This one was a more recent ad, I think. I mean, recent. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking months ago. But it's a 2 mana R that only requires 1 to untap, but also requires you to discard, which is good. That means it's really efficient in terms of the untap cost mana wise. The discard cost is steep. So overall, it's not bad, but it has a steeper setup requirement to actually go infinite. So you need a land to produce 5 mana for you. Essentially,
And that filters through your deck.
yeah, to filter through your deck, and then you can find like actual freed along the way, and then you don't have to worry about that. You can also do some wonky stuff where you use it as like a pseudo ritual on a turn to like dig. When you just have a bunch of duds in your hand, just convert it to more mana to turn into more Gretchen activations, even if you're not going infinite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how much you've actually played with the card so far. I've played with it a lot. I've comboed with it a few times. It's solid. It's not the greatest, um, but it's pretty darn good, I think.
Yeah, I've played with it a decent amount. Um, I don't find myself searching for it actively when I have other options, pretty much ever.
Yeah,
But this is the area of the combo where we have the least amount of redundancy in Gretchen. And I do think there's enough value added by the card that it's definitely playable and something you have to consider at the very least when you're playing Gretchen.
I,
Um,
definitely worth playing. I think it's in kind of the like B tier where it's strong. If you don't want to run it because it's messy, I get it. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think it's one of those cards that I'm gonna probably play until we get more of these effects, which is probably not gonna happen too often.
yeah,
So
it
it's
feels
solid.
like a B to C tier kind of card. Like, I don't really want to play it. It's a little awkward, but it is our only, like, 2 CMC enchantment option,
Yeah,
um, which comes up when you're doing, like, muddle lines and stuff. So
yeah,
I think you do have to at least consider it. So B tier is good with me.
yeah. Next up, Oboro Breeze Caller. This is about as easy of an S tier include to me as Freed. I don't know if you view it similarly. This is
Absolutely.
a card
Yes.
that's like essentially only good in Gretchen, maybe also Tadiova,
Yeah, even
but really
then.
like this is like the Gretchen combo line that like makes it worth playing Gretchen over like another deck that is also doing Freed stuff.
Yeah, I remember discovering like this combo line for myself whenever I was building this deck, and I was like, oh my god. I didn't think it was actually like that good. I thought it was just funny. And then I started playing it and realized how uninteractable this is if your opponents are not playing blue. Like,
And even
if you do
then,
not have a counter spell for the Breeze Caller, you're dead.
yeah.
Like, there's nothing you can do about it because it doesn't have the summoning sickness problem that all of our untappers do. And yeah, like you mentioned also with the immobilizing ink, you can do the same kind of like ritual plays where you just go, oh, I have 7 lands in play. I'm gonna float 3 with my land that taps for 3, float 1 extra, so I have 4 floating, bounce the land I tapped. All right, that was a ritual for 2 by returning a land to my hand.
Yeah. And
Um,
people can't get you so easily with things because you can make all the mana in response to whatever they do. So if they bounce a land, or you're like, okay, make a bunch of mana, recast it after you've bounced my thing, go again. Like, uh, it's just it's sweet. It gets to take advantage of high tide in cool ways because it actually gets to take advantage of having 2 lands that tap for multiple mana in ways that the other combo lines don't in this deck.
mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's a wizard, so
And
it's
it's a
pretty
wizard.
tutorable. So it's sweet. It's S tier. It should always go in the deck. It'll take some work to like understand the lines if you're not familiar with them, but that those lines are one of the biggest selling points of playing Gretchen. So
Yeah, weird combo line, but probably my favorite card. Like, so good.
yeah. Um,
Um,
Next up, Simic Growth Chamber. What do you want to say about it?
yeah, I mean, this card is really nice because of the way that Gretchen is built. Being that like late game targeting kind of deck, um, just getting a guaranteed extra land drop because it's effectively 2 lands in one that gets a land back to hand is really nice. You're playing plenty of basics, so you're not going to lose tempo by like, at least you should be, probably. You're not really going to lose tempo by going turn 1 tapped land, turn 2 Simic Growth Chamber, turn 3 tapped land. Like, you're not going to just automatically lose the game because you have that kind of opener. Um, and obviously, you don't have to actually commit cards to making a land tap for 2 mana, um, which is probably the biggest part of this. Like, it's just a land in your deck.
Yeah,
You don't have to commit any mana. You don't have to commit any resources at all. You're just playing out your land drops. Gretchen can put this into play at instant speed at the end of a turn cycle and basically completely mitigate the coming into play tapped issue. Like,
yeah. It also
yeah, it's
has some other like corner case upside where if you have a land that taps for enough mana, it alone goes infinite with Stone Cedar Hierophant. Um,
mm-hmm,
so there's some cool stuff and tricks you can do with it. It's like it's an auto include. You know, the opportunity cost is basically 0, uh, and it's all upside. Like there's no reason
yeah.
not to play it.
Like, you're playing so many lands in Gretchen anyways that you're very rarely gonna have to mulligan because Simic Growth Chamber is your only land in hand, right? So
No,
like, hooray!
yeah. So easy S tier card. Um, and then the last card we got to talk about in the combo enabler section is probably like one of the most like
Controversial.
controversial or like one people are divided on it most is Vigian Graph Mage. What do you want to say about Graph Mage? How do you feel about it?
So Graph Mage is another wizard on Tapper, so it automatically gets some points for being tutorable. It's in the 3 mana slot again, so it's competing with Galvanic and Freed, which is a little frustrating for him. And he's also just kind of awkward. Um, because of the way that the card is templated, it has Graph 2, so it comes in with the 2 counters, and whenever another creature comes into play, you can move one of the counters to it. and you can pay 2 to untap target creature with a counter, +1/+1 counter on it. So the really awkward thing is that without the support of any other cards, you have to play the Graph Mage first and then an untapper to get a counter on it. And then either give it haste or have it survive a whole turn cycle and go, hey guys, I'm going infinite next turn. Uh, so builds that are playing Graph Mage are usually playing some other cards to try to put +1/+1 counters on their guys beforehand, and then just drop the Graph Mage and go infinite afterwards. Activation cost is 2, so it is more efficient than Galvanic Alchemist when you are comboing. Your land doesn't have to tap for as much mana, which is nice. It only has to tap for 3.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's just it's so awkward sometimes and requires you to build your deck so differently that I don't think I can put it above B tier.
yeah. I think that's where I have it too. I've played it. I think I'm off it right now. It's not bad. You don't necessarily have to play a lot of bad cards to support it. Like you're playing decent cards like Snakeskin Veil, some land auras, right? Like the cards you play aren't bad. They're just maybe cards you probably wouldn't play if you weren't playing that. So, and you have to
And you have
have
to
them.
see them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the tricky part. But it's definitely good. It's definitely defensible. It's in the slot, like we've mentioned already, where we have the least redundancy in. So it's kind of on par with like immobilizing ink in terms of like
Yeah.
you,
Agreed.
you gotta play. You probably gotta play one of them, if not both. So it's kind of just picking your poison. So, but next up, so interaction or what Gretchen does
Uh,
best, I would argue. Um,
Absolutely.
since we
This
just
is going to be.
this is a doozy. We'll try to
Oof.
combine some, but yeah, I mean, in a deck that's aiming to play draw go and just sit with a bunch of mana, interaction is going to be like the biggest part. Whether it's protection, stopping other people from winning, whatever. Uh, you get to play lots of it, and Simic has some of the best options. So then it's just a matter of figuring out which ones are the best to get the job done, and ultimately just win the game more. So up first, Aether Spellbomb. We both love this card. You talk about it.
Oh, yeah. This card's insane. Um, Being an artifact is important if you're playing like the Trinket Mage package, right? It's also 1 mana, so it is another Dizzy spell target if you're playing Dizzy spell other than High Tide, which has come up more than I'd like to admit. Um, it's a colorless source, which is relevant against a lot of the white decks in the meta right now that give protection from a color. So it can out a lot of really weird situations against like gut, and it's a ability, so it's not a spell after you've like cast it for that 1 mana cost. Generally, this card's really powerful when you're casting it turn 1, turn 2, and just sitting on it, and
It
no one's willing to like swing into it or try to combo through it.
yeah.
Yeah, it just gets so much value by existing.
Yeah, for the low price of 1 mana up for the rest of the game, you can basically require that someone has to have at least one piece of interaction to do anything if they want to try to combo off. So powerful. It's similar to like the fact that it's colorless is huge. The fact that worst case you can cycle it for an extra like a mana to ditch it when you're just trying to dig for something and you don't care about holding up the interaction anymore is great. It's just a super solid card. S tier in my book. It's similar to Seal of Removal too, which I don't think we have in our list, but I just added. But just onboard tricks that stop people from doing things and like require them to have something up front is it's just amazing. It buys so much time.
Yeah, delayed removal is insanely powerful in this format.
Yeah. But yeah, next up, Arcane Denial.
Yeah, good card. I think this is also S tier. Um, Having counter spell for 2 mana that only has 1 pip is very relevant, comes up a lot, and the card draw is also nice because we are a combo deck that is a late game deck. So generally, we are very willing to give someone two cards at the cost of countering their win condition or anything like that. Or, we're just protecting our win and nobody's going to draw cards from it anyways, hopefully.
Yeah, having an opponent draw two cards, it's never the greatest, right? But with what our deck is doing, odds are good we have card advantage over them at that point anyway. Like just and almost certainly the mana advantage because very few decks are outpacing Gretchen mana production wise. So S tier, super, solid card. Not a whole lot to add. So next up, this one's a little more of a niche card. Avoid Fate.
Yeah.
It's a single green instant that counters an instant or enchantment that is targeting a permanent that you control. So it's stopping the instant speed removal. It's stopping witness protection or utter insignificance, stuff like that. It's almost like a hexproof spell, but not quite. It does get to protect permanents, so it's not just creatures. So you can protect your lands, which is nice. But only if an instant is targeting them. So it's pretty limited. I've played it before. I've countered plenty of things with it before, so it's not bad by any means, and it catches people off guard too, being a green counter spell. But
Yeah.
it's also just not the best of the spells we could be playing in that kind of slot.
Yeah, I think it's kind of been power crept. I think it was playable a couple of years ago, like you mentioned, for that surprise factor more than anything, and being able to protect your lands. But now we've got some other cards that we'll talk about later that have come out that are also one green. So you lose that surprise factor, and they can also protect the lands, and they do more.
Yeah.
So
So it's in that C tier. Like you could play it. It's not bad. But
yeah,
it's
still
not.
an option
Yeah.
for instant speed interaction for green mana, which is nice.
Yeah. It's just not going to be best in class. So, um, yeah. Next up, Blink of an Eye, which is identical to Into the Royal as well. So we'll talk about both. Uh, Again, this is a card I think you and I are higher on than a lot of people are. Um,
Yeah,
it's just good. I mean, it's a generically like good bounce ending on land permanent for 2 mana, which is like the going rate for that kind of effect. And then
perfectly
in
on
our
right.
in our blue green ramp deck, you can also pay 2 extra mana to draw a card. So, it does the thing, and it does it well. It replaces itself. It's an answer. If you're in a pinch, well, okay, so it's kind of weird. If you ever get in a spot where, like, for some reason you don't have access to Gretchen, but you have infinite mana, it lets you dig through your deck or it lets you combo with Archaeomancer to draw your deck. Yeah, there'd be some weird stuff going on if you're ever in that position, but it's
Yeah,
there.
infinite with Oubliette on Gretchen.
Yeah, um, but it's just a really good card that replaces itself and deals with something.
Yeah, it's. I think the base mode in Gretchen for these cards is 4 mana. And then if you're in a pinch, you're casting it for 2. Whereas it's the other way around for a lot of decks, which is why I think I'm higher on it for Gretchen than I am for most other decks. But realistically, I'd probably put it in C tier. It's an option, but it's by no means a requirement.
Yeah, I think we're high on it. You and I will probably always play one, maybe both of them even, but uh, there are plenty of similar cards too. Like the next two we're gonna talk about. So next up, Boomerang. This card is really good and happens to also be really good against Gretchen. So it 2 mana bounces any permanent. So our lands are uh, up to be targeted by this card. And that's why it's so good. We can use it against competing Gretchen decks. We can use it against anything, any permanent. The possibilities
Yeah.
are endless. So no one is winning in our format without a permanent in some way, really. So bouncing to interrupt it is good enough to at least temporarily stop any combo attempt. Save like maybe a few corner case scenarios. But it's just really really good and really efficient.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing about Boomerang for me is that if you're comparing it to Blink of an Eye, you're adding an extra pip requirement, so you have to have two blue available, and you're losing the ability to draw a card off of it, just so that you can be better against Gretchen. Because realistically, like Gretchen and Weavers are the only decks that you really care about bouncing a land. At the moment, at least, Tatiola is kind of there, but Tatiola is fine with them going back to hand, generally speaking. Um,
Yeah.
so I do think it's worse than Blink of an Eye, um, personally, but Gretchen is a strong deck, and if you want an anti-Gretchen card, Boomerang's definitely up there.
Yeah. It probably goes in like that B to C category as well. Probably more towards B, just because I mean, it is so good against Gretchen and Weavers, which is kind of like
Yeah, they're
the
very
top
common.
of they're common. They're gonna see play a lot, and they're gonna win a lot. So uh, you got to have answers for them. So
Yeah, let's talk about good Boomerang.
yeah. So then we have Boomerang with buyback, capsize. Um, talk about it.
Capsize is probably my favorite piece of interaction in Gretchen. Like the number of times that I have just straight up cast capsize for 6 as interaction, I'm kind of ashamed to admit, but not really. Like,
No, that's like the dream. There's
um,
nothing, no shame there.
it's nice. I've had games where you cast it for 6, and then cast it for 3, and then you just get it back and win later. But yeah, like perfectly castable at 3 mana. It's not great, but like you got to do what you got to do to not die sometimes. And then this card just enables any card in the deck to be a win condition if it even resembles a win condition, right? Um, you're looping Archaeomancer without losing a card, so that turns any instant or sorcery into an infinite castable, um, which with Reclaim turns any permanent into a recastable, um, which is what really enables the deck to not play bad cards
Yeah,
in dedicated win conditions that don't do anything else. So I think Capsize is S tier.
yeah. I think it's an auto include. People have been scarred for years hearing the phrase "capsize with buyback" targeting your permanent. Like,
Targeting your land.
the card is messed up. So, um, very good, very strong. Should go in every deck. It's just that simple. So,
Yeah.
um, next up, confound. Um, similar to avoid fate, similar to intervene, which we're going to talk about as well. Um, a counter spell that protects your stuff, similar to turn aside. So it counters a spell that
We can
targets.
talk about them all together if you
Yeah.
want.
So confound targets a spell that counters target spell that targets one or more creatures. Doesn't have to be your creatures, and it draws a card. Intervene, same thing, but 1 mana cheaper at the cost of not drawing a card. Um, turn aside counters target spell targets a permanent you control. So limited to you, but down to 1 mana. So, but opens up to any permanent. So these are all generally the same kind of category of card. They're protection spells. Some of them intervene and confound can stop other people's combos too. Confound cantrips. They're all just solid. Like they're. We need to protect our win attempts. We need to stop things other people are doing. Our win attempts are always going to be based around a creature. Other combo decks are almost always going to be winning through a creature in some way, shape, or form and targeting it. So these do really good at stopping combos and also protecting our combos, both, which is really nice. Like of these, confound draws a card, so it has that going for it. The extra cost, 1 mana. It's not too steep of a cost in our deck. Intervene also being good at 1 mana, like very strong. Um, and then turn aside, the ability to protect permanents is pretty huge. Um, and kind of unique. There's not a ton of things that are protecting our permanents, so it has that upside there. Um, I think I kind of have these spread across the A, B, C tier, but curious what you want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, they're all efficient, very mana efficient options. I don't like them as much as like straight up counterspell and stuff like that because I don't like how niche they are, um, specifically against non-combo decks. Um, like you're not being able to actually play them as interaction against the Dargo. Um, they're only being used to protect your combo, which is still a good application. Don't get me wrong, but I generally prefer a more modal counterspell. But they are still very strong options. I don't fault anyone for playing them. I just prefer uh, more generic interaction.
Yeah, I think they're fine. They're not like the best. I think of these, Turnside's probably like the best because of its extra like ability to protect any permanent. So it's slightly better than the other two. Um, I think that the draw card from Confound puts it slightly above Intervene because the one extra mana is pretty negligible in our deck. In other decks, that makes way more of a difference than the card draw. Um, so I think if I had to rank them, I'd put like Turn Aside slightly above Confound, slightly above Intervene,
Yeah, I
and
agree.
and somewhere in like all in like the I think I have Turn Aside like maybe inching into the A category just barely, and then like Confound and B and Intervene like in like the B maybe C like C category, just like slightly worse, right? So all very playable, all good. I've played I think all of them at one point or another in the deck. So
Yeah, I don't think I've played any of them in the deck. I don't think I've even bothered. I've played them a lot in other decks. I personally put Turn Aside in B tier, not A, but I don't blame anyone for playing them. I think they're still very strong options.
yeah. Next up, Counterspell. I mean, this one doesn't need a lot of talk. It counters everything that targets. I mean, it just counters everything. It's a counterspell. It is the counterspell. 2 blue pips, so it does have that. But otherwise,
Yeah, I
good
mean,
card has been
counterspell's
good
good.
since the inception of the game, so we might as well play it. Days. We differ on this card a lot too, so I'll let you talk because I think you're the bigger proponent of it.
Yeah, so I like the cards that bounce an island to hand and Bobby doesn't. Is basically what we're learning today.
Yeah.
Um, Daze is really powerful in those early turns at stopping some of the more explosive aggro decks. Like, boy, let me tell you, if you go turn one Island Pass and somebody tries to cast a turn one Dargo and you daze their Dargo, it feels so good.
Yeah.
Um, their day is ruined. Your day is made. The best way any Magic game can possibly go, right there, if you ask me. Um, yeah, like Daze is really strong at stopping the early aggro plays. It's good at protecting your early win attempts and has some weird applications if people are trying to like blow up your Mystic Sanctuary, which doesn't happen very often. Very, very niche, but theoretically possible. Um, but yeah, this is like an early game card that can come up in the late game still if someone's mana screwed, or just due to the fact that no one plays Days, so no one's playing around Days, and sometimes decks have very thin mana margins. Like they don't get to have extra mana sitting around to pay for Days.
Yeah.
Um,
It's one of
so
those with
like
like a
big
super
fan.
high ceiling, but can sometimes just be absolutely
But yeah,
dead.
no, this floor can't. The floor on this card is very, very low,
Yeah.
especially if you don't have an island and you're casting this for 2 mana with a forest and a land enchantment. Like, woof, not great. If it's still countering something,
Cool. Yeah.
hey,
I mean, if
that's
it,
a 2 mana counter spell.
yeah.
That's totally fine. But yeah, like it gets worse and worse the later the game goes. Generally, my philosophy is that since we're a late game deck, we have the card advantage to not care as much about days not being as good. And bouncing an island can still, like, at least get a sanctuary back to hand to get something else from your graveyard. But I don't blame anyone for not wanting to play it. I would put it in B tier.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have it in C is where I'm at. If you get someone with it, it's it feels amazing. I'm not gonna lie, I've done it. Right, I get it. Um, but in like the late game scenarios where everyone just has tons of mana, you're just like, I'd rather have literally anything else other than this card. Sometimes, so um, it's definitely
And
not
same
bad.
applications as like high tide line, like really weird shenanigans stuff too, where you just bounce an island to bounce an island. But yeah, still like very weird card. I don't blame you for having it in C tier at all.
Yeah. Um, we can agree on this next card though, which does also return a land, and that card is Deprive. Basically, counter spell with the added cost of having to bounce a land, which we've talked about. Does have some benefit or isn't at least as much of a downside in this deck as others. Um, it does nutty things with Mystic Sanctuary, especially in like a 1v1 setting where you can just effectively make sure you're countering at least one spell there's every turn and like deprive locking them in a way, which is pretty sick. Um, it's good. It's basically just second counter spell in the deck. Um, I mean I love this card. I think it's really strong and should be played in most decks. Kind of in the A tier, pushing S tier maybe, but it's just
Yeah,
really really good.
I'd say it's definitely borderline S tier, but because it is an additional cost to bounce the land, and you don't always want to do that, um, I can see an argument for A, and it's still 2 blue pips. Um, so I'm fine with A tier, but this card's insane. I do think you probably should be playing it.
Yeah. And then Dispel is next up. Single mana blue instant target counter target
Counter
instant.
instance.
Um, luckily, when we're trying to win on our turn, most people are trying to interact with instants. So a single blue to stop any of those is pretty dang good. Most combos are trying to win with an instant in some way, usually, or in counter fights, or interaction fights. This can come in and, make like kind of seal the deal, make sure you win on, that fight. Um, and it's just a single blue, right? It's really good, really solid, really cheap. Just one of the more efficient counter spells in our format, if not, you know, arguably the most efficient.
Yeah, yeah. The spell is amazing. Pretty much everyone plays instance.
Yeah,
You would struggle to find a competitive deck not playing instance.
yeah,
So Dispel very good. I think it's S tier pretty
yeah,
easily.
yeah. Next up, Dispersal Shield counters a spell if its mana cost is less than or equal to the highest converted mana cost among permanents you control. Basically, so it counters everything. It doesn't isn't restricted on like types of spells it can counter. And in our enchantment based deck, odds are good we have at least a 3-drop in play. If not, or at least a 2, and normally at least a 3 almost the entire game, right? Like Gretchen on 2 is a normal thing, so you know it's always good in counter fights where that's CMCs are low of the when we're talking about spells being cast in those fights. Um, and when we get into like the 3s and 4s that we can put into play, that's countering most things that are played in cPDH at that point. There are a couple 5+ mana things that get cast, but I mean, yeah, it's just almost a catch-all most of the time. It's almost like counterspell levels of like gonna counter anything at once.
Yeah, and it's like so much better in Gretchen than most other decks because you have those enchantments. So instead of relying on like creatures to sit out there that might get removed in response, because you can respond to Dispersal Shield by like removing the permanent that has the CMC to make it not counter it. But that doesn't happen very much in Gretchen because a lot of the time your biggest CMC is either your 4 toughness commander, which is not boltable, or it's on your enchantment that's attached to a land, which is also not boltable. Uh, so, yeah, I think it's just a bit better in Gretchen than most decks, and it's still pretty playable in most decks. So, I'd say it's a solid A tier.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with it too. So, um, next up, Echoing Truth. So, similar to the Into the Royals and Boomerangs and Capsize we talked about, it bounces non-land permanents. Has the added clause of bouncing all permanents that have the same name also. So, where that comes up is all these token making decks, which there are plenty of in this format. Whether it's people playing Abdel, making a bunch of soldiers, TPI with a bunch of soldiers, people playing
Notably, the same name as Abdel's soldiers.
which is super sweet. Slimes Against Humanity, Hair Apparents, right? Like we have a good chunk of decks that are running lots of tokens.
Or even multiple people playing the same commander. 2 Dargos at your table. Let me
Yeah,
tell you, Echoing Truth goes crazy.
yeah. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. Can bounce someone like if they've made a lot of like clues or foods or something. It doesn't really work well against treasures because they can get stacked or whatever. But again, it's just going rate for a bounce spell that has huge upside in certain scenarios. That can be like a blowout essentially if it resolves in those like scenarios. That and like its floors, it's just like a solid bounce spell. So, probably it's in like I think it's an S tier for me. I'm always gonna play it in basically every blue deck. I think at this point.
Yeah, it
And
took me a
definitely
while
this
to
one.
come around on it, but I think it's S tier. Yeah, this card's insane.
Yeah. Next up, this card wants to kind of do something similar where it wants to eat a lot of things, but fade away. How do you feel about the card fade away?
So Fadeaway is like pretty much the only board wipe that we have access to in Simic. Um, so it is unique. It's 3 mana sorcery speed, which is annoying, and it only hits creatures, and they can pay for their creatures to keep them, or sacrifice a permanent, which doesn't have to be the creature. So it's not guaranteed to remove any creatures, which is annoying. We're
Yeah.
also a fairly creature heavy combo deck, so we do also have to pay for Fadeaway, which is also annoying. We usually can, but it's annoying that we have to.
Yeah. It's a card that like you don't really have control over it doing what you want it to do.
Yeah, like
You can
it'll always do whatever you least want it to do.
yeah.
It gives your opponents control.
Yeah. You'll get some times where it does what you want it to do a little better. There are opportune times to cast it when people are tapped out and things and it can do the thing, but it's always just like never quite there in terms of what you want it to be. And the cost where we have to actually pay for our stuff too is the biggest reason I'm not a fan of it because we're so dead set on committing creatures to the board. For that reason, I have it like I have it in like that kind of. I think I have it in D, honestly, where it's not something we really want to be doing. I could see it, but you'd have to build around it a
Yeah,
little more, I think.
yeah, I am not very high on this card. I think it's D tier.
Yeah. Um, Flash counter, we can quickly talk about. It's just a spell that costs 1 more. So if the spell's good, flash counter's good. Again, the extra mana isn't a huge deal in our deck. Um, it's not quite S tier. And you don't want the deck to be full of just counter target instants. Um, so you're not going to see this in like lots of people's decks. It's in that like B to C tier range for me, where I don't know if I play it because we have so many good 1 mana protection options. Um, but it's certainly very strong. So
Yeah, I think at 2 mana you're starting to compete with a lot of other really good counter spells.
yeah,
So it's probably C tier for me, but it's still solid.
yeah,
Still does the thing.
yeah. It's just slightly worse to spell, and the spell is great. So if you're playing a slightly worse great card, you're still in a good spot. And if that's a card that's on the chopping block, you're in a real good spot, I would say. So,
Mhm.
um, foil, foil,
Foil's a card.
foil is one of the most talked about cards that I do not like. Um,
Hey, free interaction is always worth something, you know?
yeah,
You can't say it isn't a free counter spell.
it's true. It is a free spell. Uh, it's a pretty steep cost though. If you're playing all the stuff that bounces islands, like Puzzle was talking about, the discarding an island part is a low cost, but discarding 2 cards to cast this for free, it's just rough. That's a lot. We have the ability to pay 4 mana for it, but that shouldn't you should be running foil because you want to cast it for free more than you want to ever pay 4 mana for it. And so I think the cost is just a little too high for what we want to be doing, right? It has to be specifically an island and another card. Um, and
Yeah,
that's a
not
lot.
to mention, like, on one hand, yeah, Gretchen draws a lot of cards, but Gretchen is also putting your lands into play. So, like, you're not holding lands like you
Yeah.
are in other decks that are drawing a bunch of cards and not able to get their lands out of their hand. So it's not as powerful in something like an is it control deck. It might be. Um, like
Yeah.
we can just put those lands into play instead. So I don't like foil as much. Maybe if you're playing Quandrix's Apprentice,
Oh yeah, that card
foil's
is
like
nuts in that deck.
insane. But since we can actually get the lands out of our hand, I don't like foil very much.
Yeah, that's where I'm at on it too. I have it in D. Like I don't think you ever want to be playing it.
Yeah, I
That's not going to
agree.
stop people from playing it, right? Like some people just want to go all in on it, and that's fine. But uh,
Just play days.
yeah. So Gaia's gift. This we can talk about it in kind of the same vein we talk about Snakeskin Veil and sort of Vines too. Um, they're all slightly
Yeah.
different, but they're all pretty similar too. Gaia's gift costs 2, gives a creature a +1/+1 counter, and gives it reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible into turn. Snakeskin Veil is a single green, puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it gains hexproof until end of turn. And Vines gives target creature it makes so target creature cannot be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control until end of turn. So,
Yeah.
um,
Notably not hexproof.
not hexproof, which is good, which means you can use it to stop opposing people's things from being interacted with by them. Um, so yeah, all these are really great. They're like protection spells essentially, and vines can be interaction to stop other people. Um, Gaia's Gift and Snakeskin Veil notably put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, which is super relevant for Vigi and Graph Mage, which we already talked about. Um, they're all cheap. They all, when we talked about Avoid Fate, being a single green and that being like a rarity for interaction points. These are the cards that came out along with Tameo Safekeeping that like made holding up a single green a lot more scary. And so if you're playing Vigi and Graph Mage, Gaia's Gift and Snakeskin Veil are like auto includes. You have to play them. They're good, and they enable your thing. Vines should be an almost like an auto include, basically no matter what, with just how efficient it is at protecting your stuff, and how good is it stopping other people's stuff, right? Like it goes both ways. We can
And the
talk.
pump is relevant sometimes too. Like if there's a board wipe, you can pump your untapper and just, keep an untapper through the turn,
I've also
which comes up.
I've also seen someone vines another person's commander to kill another player
Yeah,
playing
you can
the
do
Gretchen
that.
player. Um,
Uh, you can Vines pump your Oboro Breeze Caller that's just sitting out there as a value piece and get a 5/5 flyer,
yeah,
which can kill people. You know, like
and
it comes up.
if you're going infinite, it can be used to pump your lands to be infinite if you're animating them as another win
Yeah, make
con.
infinite attack
Yeah,
swingers with any three dudes you already have sitting out.
yeah,
Gretchen plus your untapper plus anything you can give haste to.
yeah,
Um, like there's so many applications for this card. It's insane. Vines is S tier easy.
yeah. Vine's S tier.
Uh,
And one other one to add to this is Tamiya safekeeping. It's a little different, but I think it merits a conversation here too. It's another single green instant. It gives a permanent you control hexproof, so more like it's kind of more like the turn aside types cards and avoid fate type cards. Um, but it gives it hexproof indestructible and also gains life. So similarly in that one mana like protection spot. Um,
yeah, notably still can be played against board wipes, which the
yeah,
targeting ones cannot be played.
yeah,
Um, and works on your lands, which the other green ones don't work for. Which is why I think this is the like most direct competition for Avoid Fate.
yeah,
Um, like this is just better Avoid Fate,
yeah,
and the gaining 2 life comes up once again. Like this card's insane. I think Tamiyo's is also S tier,
yeah.
and
Tamiya's and Vines are like you got to be playing them. Um, Snakeskin Veil and Gaia's Gift are kind of in that like B to C tier. I guess more like C tier, right? If you're playing Vigi and Graph Mage, you gotta play them essentially.
yeah,
Um,
but they're not as great as the others. They're
yeah,
a bit more niche, and Gaia's Gift is 2 mana.
yeah,
Um,
still strong. Like probably like B tier. I guess is kind of where I'm landing on them. I think where
yeah,
you're gonna play one of them probably in the deck, even if you're not playing Graph Mage, but their auto includes if you play the Graph Mage package. So, um,
already.
but yeah,
Aura removal.
yeah, imprisoned in the moon. So this is a newer card in terms of PDH legality. It got downshifted here recently. Uh, Blue oubliette is what it's sometimes referred to as by some people. Um, Imprisoned in the moon is really good at eliminating commanders in a way that they can't just be put in the command zone. It turns whatever it turns a creature, land, or planeswalker into a land. We're probably only ever targeting creatures more often than not. But it locks it away forever, never to be seen again. For some decks, that's game over. Like they have no way to answer it. It's done. For other decks, they're gonna have to find a way to dig out of it if they didn't have a protection spell at that time. It can just be super backbreaking. It's expensive for like what we're doing interaction wise. 3 mana, but it's a unique effect that like kind of merits the cost in a way. It makes it like palatable if you're getting that level of like bang for your buck with it. If you're effectively eliminating a commander from the game, if you're just using it against a problematic card, it's not as exciting because of the number of other options like witness protection and other insignificance that are similar here. Um,
Signify. Yeah,
Lignify.
we've got a few on here
Yeah.
for that.
And these are all the same essentially, except Imprison gets rid of it permanently, whereas all the Lignify, utter insignificance, witness protection all turn it into a creature. So they're
They
still
can
playing
still
ways
sack it. They can block
sack
it.
it, bounce it, block with it, attack with it. Um, they play ways to do
Much
it.
more interactable. Just kill it with a murder or
Yeah,
whatever they're playing.
yeah,
Just not an option for Imprison.
yeah. And then utter insignificance of this bunch is also a little different in that it has flash, which is a selling point on it. So, all these cards are definitely strong. I normally only find space for one in kind of the list I've played. Um, and of the bunch, I think utter insignificance is probably among the strongest because it has flash, so you can do it instant speed. Witness protection, lignify, imprisoned. they're all still good. They're kind of in that like C range where like if you want to play one, you can. If you want to like if you expect to have more commanders you want to deal with in that way, you can play extra copies of this type of stuff. Um, but they're just okay.
Yeah. I think the sorcery speed is really the biggest issue I have with this type of removal.
Yeah.
Um, I'm fine with it for specifically like lignify and imprison because you are like really removing the creature. But they are pretty much dedicated to being commander removal, whereas utter insignificance being instant speed means I can use it on combo pieces
And you can
a lot easier.
with utter insignificance, you can also. I mean, it's hard for us to produce a colorless mana in this deck, and maybe not even possible
I
depending
don't
on
think
how
it's
you build
possible
it.
for me,
Yeah,
but
it depends on how you build it. But there is a chance where you could also exile the enchanted creature with utter insignificance, which could come up. So,
yeah,
um,
probably not in this deck unless you get imprisoned in the moon.
yeah,
But
and then you got some other problems, but
yeah, but at least we're in blue.
yeah, but yeah. So,
Yeah, I the tears there.
all right. Moving on. So we've talked about intervene already. We talked about Israel. We talked about lignify. Loose focus. This is one of my favorite cards, or counter spells at least, that's been printed semi recently. Um, because replicate is so unique and cool. Um, on its face, it's like a slightly powered down mana leak. Counter target spell, it's control phase 2. But replicate making copies of it, so it's multiple different spells that have to be answered, is clutch. Very rarely are we getting into the point where people have like 4 mana left over when we're fighting through things, and then if they're tapping through things, then you just need one more thing on top to stop them. So it's good in like the middle of a fight to really clear up the stack or just make it so you can't lose. Um, really strong. The fact that each replicate only costs 1 makes each one after like the original cast that much more insane. Um, it's just really good, especially when we have so much mana in this deck.
Yeah, like it's just so efficient when you are replicating it. Like as soon as you're paying that replicate cost for an actual reason, this card just easily is a blowout in Stack Wars. Um, so I can see it being very powerful. And we're playing Gretchen, so we have the mana, right? That's not a big issue.
Yeah. So I have it kind of in the A tier. I like it a lot. Um,
Yeah, I can see that. I don't personally play it, but I have considered it a lot. Um, so I think A tier is pretty reasonable.
yeah. And then we have basically the similar card, but not as exciting in Mana Leak next up. Again, it costs 3 to pay if you want to, avoid your spell getting countered with Mana Leak. But 2 mana, it's an efficient spell. It's just kind of gotten outclassed a lot over time. There's just so many different counter spell options at the 2 slot. So it depends on what you're most concerned about. It being it doesn't care about the type of spell you're targeting, which is an upside there. Um, but you know, if someone has 3 mana, like you have to have something else, right? So it's not always guaranteed to stop anything. Um,
Yeah, I was playing it a couple years ago, but I do think it's generally just outclassed by loose focus. Um, the only way it's really better is when you're not in a stack war, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. So
it's still like good, but not insane. I'd put it in B tier probably.
yep, I think that's where I'm at with it too. Um, then after that, we have memory lapse. So again, just more counter spells. So this one's unique in that it puts the countered spell on top of its owner's library. This can sometimes be awesome and sometimes bite you in the butt if you aren't thinking and careful about it. Because people can draw a card and have access to that card again. So
Mm-hmm.
It's still very strong because it just generically counters something. Um, but you have to like you got to know that card is still there lurking and not far away. So, um, it if you stop a win attempt, you know the win attempt is coming again next turn, probably, depending on what the setup was required. Um, if you're just trying to delay something, or like it's really good in counter fights because you don't care, like if you're going for the win, you don't care about next turn, unless they have a way to instant speed draw a card. But it's just like generically powerful, um, and just requires some thinking. You can do some tricky stuff where you memory lapse your own spell and draw it with Gretchen, and then get to redo things yourself, which is fun. Doesn't come up all the time, but it's there, right? It's a tricky, cool interaction we have because we have just the ability to draw a card at any time with our commander. So anything like the A tier, it's going to be played more often than it's not, and it's really, really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pushing S tier for me, but I just
Yeah.
this card's so good. Especially like in counter spell wars over someone else's win condition, it's also really strong. Situation I see a lot with memory lapse is I throw my first counter spell because we're playing Gretchen and we always have two. Um, they throw their like counter spell at my counter spell, and then you memory lapse that counter spell. And if that's like the end of it, then they have a counter spell next up to draw. And if you're not trying to like win the game anytime soon, then the table just knows that there's a counter spell in hand, and it helps prevent other people from winning the games, or at least attempting wins, which helps Gretchen get into that grind game, which once again is generally the goal of the deck.
Yeah.
So I think Memory Labs has so many applications, but
Yeah.
A tier is reasonable. Um,
Yeah. Super good. Um, Next up, we have Mizium Skin. Also, probably worth talking about Shore Up similarly here. They're kind of in line with those single green spells we talked about before, where they're protection as opposed to like stopping other people. Here, the spells each just give your creature hexproof. They give them an extra toughness, which can save them, and we're talking about damage concerns. And Shore Up is additionally cool because it untaps creature, which is really sweet. When odds are good, we're trying to protect an untapper, so it's a ritual on top of protection a lot of time. Yeah, I mean these cards are just really solid. They're 1 mana, so they're super efficient. So they put us in the spot where we have to start figuring out, okay, which ones do we want, right? Like, we have like an embarrassment of riches basically, and they're all very solid. You can't really fault anyone for playing any of them. But
I think Shore Up's clearly the best because it untaps, which is very relevant for our deck.
Yeah.
Mizium Skin, you can overload to like try to protect against board wipes or really weird interaction scenarios, but more often than not, you're probably not overloading Skin.
Yeah.
So I do think it is worse than Shore Up, but
yeah, both are good. Like Shore Up's kind of that A tier, and then Mizium Skin's probably like B, right? They're both very strong.
Yeah, the ritual potential is just too good on Shore Up.
Yeah, it's too good, way too good. But yeah, Moonsnare prototype. So I don't think this one gets played in very many Gretchen lists at all. But it is a unique effect.
Like you're just like you're barely ever casting this as its artifact.
Yeah.
Because your deck's just got so much ramp. This would be a way to produce colorless.
Yeah.
If you wanted to do that, but more often than not, this is just being played for the channel because it's uncounterable, and also on an artifact, so it's searchable with Trinket Mage.
Yeah.
So it does have like tech applications.
Yeah, it's really unique. It is expensive. 5 mana is a lot. We're a big mana deck, so it's not undoable in our deck, but it's still a lot. The uncounterable bit, like you mentioned, is pretty nice. It does still have a color identity, even though it's an artifact, so we don't dodge protection or anything. But dodging counterspells is pretty huge. I've seen it come up when other decks have played this card. It's not really what Gretchen wants to be doing, though, right? Like, we're not really
We
playing
already have
artifacts.
Spellbomb,
Yeah.
you know.
So it's not something I'm not really excited about playing Trinket Mage in the first place. I think this is a card you only play if you're playing Trinket Mage.
Yeah, and even then, like,
And then
I don't
yeah,
know if it's worth playing, so I'd put it in D tier.
yeah,
But
that's where I'm at on it as well.
yeah, not D tier. Next up, though, Muddle the Mixture.
Yeah. Why? Why? You tell me this card's good or something?
Yeah, something like that. So it's flash counter, but it can also hit sorceries, and it has an extra line of text that comes up on occasion. Transmute on our 2-drop. So this is notably a blue instant that is interaction and a tutor. So with the addition of immobilizing ink, merchant scroll can get us to a win condition through tutoring muddle the mixture and then tutoring immobilizing ink, which is like very expensive, but it's another line. And muddle the mixture is very castable as a counter spell as well. So this card's like insane.
It does it all. Like, it really just does it all. Like, it's an uncounterable tutor. It is great in stack fights. Like, yeah, it's an S tier card. You got to play it. It's too good not to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if you got way too much mana, you can tutor Stealth Suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Nature's Claim. This is the first time we're really talking about a spell that's dedicated at removing a specific type of permanent instead of a catch-all. And the reason being is you want to have the deck be as flexible as possible and catch everything you can. So the more you can paint with broad strokes with your interaction, the better. That being said,
really good at doing that with bounce.
Yeah.
So
that being said, Nature's Claim is probably like the most efficient way to deal with an artifact or enchantment, and we do not care at all about how much life our opponents have. So, of the options that's of the disenchant naturalize effects, this is probably the most mana efficient one. It's okay, it's good against other Gretchen decks. It kills, there are plenty of artifacts and enchantments you can kill in the format, right? Like Arabella gets killed. You can blow up like a protection aura that's on some big bear like Wilson or something, or blow up a land aura, right? There's plenty of targets, but that's just not generally what our deck is really concerning itself with. Like, we're just concerned about staying alive and stopping other people from winning, and so this can sometimes do that, but odds are good. You'll also draw and it'll just not do anything, or at least nothing you care to do.
Most of the things that Nature's Claim is hitting, I'm probably fine with just bouncing instead with a more generic blue removal piece.
Yeah. So to that end,
I don't value the destruction.
Yeah. So to that end, I'd rather play something like Return to Nature, which is also on here, which does that, and also exiles a card from graveyard. So it's just an added bit of modality for an extra mana. Still something I'm not super excited to play, but it's a similar card with added modality.
Yeah, and I'm willing to pay that extra mana because exiling from the grave is not something that most of our blue cards do, and is the mode that you're more often than not going to be picking with Return to Nature, in my experience.
Yeah. Especially with the new version we'll talk about a little bit later that just got printed too. So, yeah, I think Nature's Claim, absent some shift that moves into like some crazy artifact or enchantment based decks becoming much more of a concern for us, is kind of in like that D tier where like I don't think we need to play it given our other options available. And then Return to Nature's in like the C tier where it's a completely defensible option. it has a pretty high floor because it can always deal something, but it doesn't have that crazy high of a ceiling either. So um, it's just like a solid card. So
Agreed.
um,
Uh, Negate. This card's good. If we're saying flash counter is good, negate's good, right?
yep,
It's just better flash counter, which is my issue with flash counter. Like there are so many cards that are just better flash counter.
yeah, yeah,
Then it's hard to find a slot for that card specifically, but negate's great.
yeah. Negate is S tier. It should basically always be played. It's essentially like a counter spell part two, like for everything we care about. So
Just
yeah,
doesn't hit Dargo.
it doesn't hit creatures, but that's fine. So, um, Narc Stealth Suit. So this is a card that is also like talked about quite a bit and is varies in like lists. People play it, don't they? Love, hate it. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty unique though. Um, so it gives your creature Shroud, which is annoying when we want to you target it to win. So it does create some hiccups for us when we're trying to combo, unless we're using Galvanic Alchemist, which is a nifty little trick there.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can attach it and move it around at instant speed is what makes it really huge. So if someone has removal, you can move it around. If you have tons of mana, which this deck does, you can even get to the spot where you're moving it multiple times in a stack fight, letting certain things fizzle, and then moving it to something else to let like your spell resolve. Right? You can get really
Yeah,
tricky with it.
that's when the card is like actually broken.
Yeah,
Is when you have the mana to move it around mid stack fight.
yeah, and it happens. And 1 mana to equip is pretty great too. It's a low cost. It's only 2 to cast. It's really solid, but we have lots of protection already, right? So it's tricky. There can be games where it feels like it does nothing. It's not the most exciting card to draw in your opener by any means. Um,
Yeah.
but in
And it's
some,
fine to just let it sit out on an untapper for like value turns and just
yeah,
make sure it's not getting bolted mid game.
yeah,
Is the other application for it, but
yeah. And then people get so worried about dealing with it that like you can fight over it, and then you've effectively baited out all the removal, and you still have your like even if it ends up with your stealth suit gone, you still have your creature at the end of it. So, um,
yeah, people are terrified of this card. It
yeah,
is, it's really funny.
yeah. So it's
And
really strong.
it pairs well with half of your win conditions: a Poro Breeze Color and the
Alchemist.
Vidalkin or Alchemist, not Aether Mage. That one targets. Although a Boro Breeze Color, you can just like bounce stuff in response. But if you want to keep your Boro Breeze Color on board, you can just use Stealth Suit instead.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, like it's fine. I think it's like a strong option. So I'd say B tier. Like
yeah. It's it's B. It's not really techy. I could see reasons to not play it, but
yeah, it's not
it's
mandatory, but
it's really good though. So
yeah,
prohibit. So this is similar to like dispersal shield in that it cares about the mana cost of spells it's targeting. For 2 mana, it's countering a spell if it costs 2 or less. If you kick it and make it 4 mana, it counters anything that's 4 or less. As we talked about, these fights come down to usually cheap interaction being thrown around and or cheap counter spells, cheap removal, all this stuff. Um, Prohibit doesn't care about the type of spell, only the CMC. So it can hit cheap creatures that are scary too. He can reckless fire weavers, Seeker of Sky, like random like cheap combo pieces, right? So it's good in that regard. Ping 4 is a little steep for it if that's what you have to do, but I mean that hits snuff outs. It hits
thunderclap, that kind of
Malcolm's
stuff.
thunderclaps. Yeah, it hits lots. So it's not bad. And we have you know the mana a lot of times if we do need to kick it. So solid counter spell. I think it's kind of in. I mean, it's in. I don't know, A tier, I guess. Like it's not an auto include, but it's just one of the stronger counterspell options we have.
Yeah, I mean, I think you very rarely have to kick this card for it to hit the cards that you care about. Um, So I think it's A tier. Like I
Yeah.
think it's on the same level as Dispersal Shield.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. Relic. So this is a card that doesn't get played a lot in Gretchen lists, in my experience. I haven't played
Not
it a lot.
anymore, at least.
Yeah, I haven't played it a lot, but it's a very strong card. One of the better pieces of graveyard interaction in our format is kind of where it is.
Yeah. I mean, cantripping graveyard removal is pretty good.
Yeah, it's got the like spell bomb thing where worst case it cycles. Um, the cycling does come with the cost of exiling our graveyard as well, but outside of comboing, we don't normally care too much about what's in our graveyard. You'll have to be mindful of it sometimes if you're playing Relic, just to make sure you're not like losing a piece that you used early as interaction that is crucial later. But we have enough redundancy that shouldn't come up as an issue too frequently. Um, if you're running Trinket Mage, it's great. If you're, wanting to be that extra bit of responsible with graveyard decks, I feel like we've seen them a little bit more as of late. And with some spoilers, we may see even more graveyard stuff here soon. So I think Relic is increasing in value or utility. But it's
Yeah.
just like it's a tech card. It's like a meta call card essentially. Um,
Yeah. Agreed.
so kind of, I guess that's the C tier then.
Yeah.
Not the worst, but not the best. So, um,
Yeah. I wouldn't play it unless I have to. But
yeah. Resculpt. How do you feel about Resculpt?
Resculpt sucks. Uh, so this is blue instant speed interaction that exiles. So it does have that going for it. Um, when that matters, it matters a lot, which is definitely relevant, and it hits artifacts or creatures. Generally speaking, you're just hitting creatures. But that's all fine and dandy. 2 mana, that's pretty on rate for exile. But it gives your opponent a 4/4. So because of that
Yeah.
downside, like Gretchen has 4 toughness, so we can't just like chump block it forever. 4/4 is a pretty big body, and it means that it's not really worth it to just throw this at like an attacker because we're still giving them an attacker. So this is only really here to deal with like relics on our combo turn or combo creatures. Um, and I feel like you'd rather just play a bounce spell. Um,
Yeah. If it were
4/4
anything,
body's just too big.
if it were anything less than a 4/4, I'd be
Yeah,
way more interested. But the fact that our our Gretchen is never going to be able to block it favorably, it hurts a lot. So
yeah, 2 mana beast within, absolutely. But yeah, it's just 4 mana 4/4 is that's a big number.
yeah. Um, we already talked about Return to Nature, Rewind. Uh, where do you stand on it?
I I think Rewind's just more of a pet card for me than anything. Um, like it's got niche application of countering your own spells as a ritual, um, and it like you might as well win the game when this resolves as just a counter spell. But generally, it's not going to resolve in my experience. People are very willing to counter this. Um, it's great when it works, but the floor is a 4 mana counter spell that gets countered. But
Yeah,
like if you're looking at it as a floor of the card resolving, it's a free counter spell that just requires you to have 4 mana,
yeah. It,
which is something. Like that's not bad.
yeah, it's one of those cards where when it is great, it feels great, and when it's bad, it feels bad. So to that end, it's kind of in the C tier where like I think it used to
Yeah,
be a lot better, but we just keep getting more and more cheaper. Like the cheaper interaction over time has just kind of like started to phase it and some of these other counter spells we've talked about out of
Mhm.
favor, essentially. So,
Yeah.
Sapphire Charm, your pet card. You love this card.
This card's actually good
Yeah.
though. Sapphire Charm, it serves a role similar to one of your pet cards that we'll talk about later. Where it's modal interaction and or something else, and also a win condition. So this has the same ability to win the game as a compulsive research does, where you can target a player to draw cards, and they don't draw until the next turn, which is like weird, but it's a thing. But it also phases creatures out and gives flying, which can be relevant if you're trying to block a flyer, but at that point, just like phase it out.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to block and kill it, which you're not really doing in Gretchen. So for the most part, it's phasing creatures out on a 1 mana instant, which is good. Um, and it's also a win condition that you can just loop later in the game after you've used it for interaction. So I really like this card. I think it's pretty good. I'd put it in like A tier.
I am not as high on this card. I think the phasing ability is awesome. I think that's easily the best part of the card. The fact that it's sometimes a win con is like fine. I'm never casting that on myself, right? It's kind of where I'm at with it, is why I'm not the biggest fan. I'm only ever casting this like outside of combo to phase something, and that's fine. But I'm just not as high on it for that reason, basically. There's also the corner case where if you win as you go to time, this cannot be your win con because
Yeah,
no one's going to get a
it's
turn. So then you better have something
it's
else
annoying.
too. Um, which again isn't going to come up all the time, but it's something you got to think about when you're going and playing in tournaments. Like being able to actually win on your turn as opposed to like having to pass turn to effectuate your win is important in those scenarios. So I think it's a really the phasing is really unique. We don't have a lot of that in our format, and it's very powerful. Um, so I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So it's kind of I have it more in C. I think, um, as like a kind of a tech like
Yeah, and I mean
tech
it is
piece.
a techie card, so I'm
Yeah,
fine with C tier. Like I have no debates on that, but I think the 1 mana phase out is strong enough that I really like the card.
yeah. Um, Next up, so we talked about Shore Up, Snakeskin Veil already. Snap. This card's sick. Uh, Especially in this deck where we're generating tons of mana. 2 mana bounce a creature. Again, that's on rate with everything we already talked about, all our bounce spells. So, and then it has the upside of untapping 2 lands. So, worst case, we're untapping 2 mana. More often than not, we're untapping more than 2 mana with how our deck works. So in addition to being removal, it's a combo piece. You know, it combos with our Archaeomancer. If we have 2 lands that produce more than 6 mana, which it's kind of asking a lot, but it's not the hardest to do when we have High Tide and all of our land enchantments. Um, so it is a way to gain infinite mana in the deck, in
Yeah,
addition to just being a solid piece of removal.
yeah, the combo lines are pretty difficult to set up, but it's nice to have that option if because once again it's an option that gets around the summoning sickness issue, which is really nice in those super control heavy matchups. And also like it's less modal than our other 2 mana bounce removal, because it only hits creatures, but that's our main target anyways. And being free or negative cost is just just so good.
Yeah. So that end, this is like S tier. Like
Yeah,
it's so good. A combo piece that does other things. There's no reason not to run it. Um, Snapback. Snap, but it can be free, basically. Or I guess a bounce. It's not snap. It just returns a creature hand, but it can be free. Um, Free spells are
yeah.
sweet. Um,
Like snap is technically free, but you still have to have 2 mana available.
yeah,
This one can be cast on 0 mana, which is the reason you would want to play it.
yeah.
But we're a big mana deck, right? So like it's not really a concern as much as it is for other decks. Um,
Yeah, we're never really hurting for the mana. Like, we don't need free spells a lot of the time. Like, it's just not something Gretchen has to worry about. Um, which is why I guess I'm lower on like the foils and dazes, like we talked about, right? Like, we don't need the free aspect of them that much in our deck. Um,
mhm.
and discarding another blue card in our deck means discarding other interaction probably,
And you're not discarding it.
or
You're
exiling.
exiling it, which
So
is even worse because we can't loop it if you have to exile your compulsive research or insert other card, which comes up. It's like so. Yeah, I want to be high on snapback, but in Gretchen specifically, it's like I don't know. I don't think I can put it in D tier because it is free interaction.
but we just don't
But
need it. It's
yeah,
it's getting to the bottom of the barrel of like playables. Um,
yeah, it's probably bottom of C tier. Like it's a tech option. You can get people with it because no one would expect you to be playing it.
yeah,
Um, but
yeah. Spell Pierce. So we've talked about this card a lot. We're both pretty high on it, I believe. Um, it being cheap is cool. It hitting any non-creature is cool. It's like a mix between Negate, Spell Pierce, and Mana Leak all in one. Like, it's 1 mana. It only hits non-creatures, but it has, it can be overcome by paying attacks. So it's insane early against like an early attempt to remove something, or maybe like an early combo attempt. And it's really good late because if people pay for it, you've essentially like gotten two. You've prevented them from doing something else, and you can come over the top with another piece of interaction to stop them after. So you tax their resources while you're stopping them, or you just stop them outright, which is also cool. So, really efficient, really strong. Gets played a ton in like other formats in combo decks because its rate is so good. Um, so
yeah, I
like
don't think it's S tier, but it is for all those reasons just like really strong. Um,
yeah, so
Probably A tier.
yeah, I think I have an A tier. Um, yeah, just really good. We've talked about safekeeping. We've talked about turn aside. Unwind. So this is similar to rewind we talked about earlier. It's a mana cheaper at the cost of only targeting non-creatures. And then obviously only untapping 3 lands as opposed to 4. So all of the same things we said about rewind, cue them here. Just add in the limitation that it's only targeting non-creatures. So
Yeah, and 3 mana I think chunks it up like to be a lot better.
yeah,
Um, and it still hits pretty much everything you would be hitting with rewind. So I think unwind is honestly a tier above.
yeah,
I think this is much more playable.
yeah. I think so too. I'm not on either of them at the moment. I don't believe, but I like unwind is in that like 100 first 100 second card territory where I could easily see adding it back in. So we talked about utter insignificance.
Paper snag.
Vapor Snag. So this is a unique card. It's sort of unique compared to what we're talking about. I guess it's more on board with like Snapback and Snap as opposed to like the non-creature or non-land bounce spells we talked about, where it's just really efficient. It's a really efficient bounce spell. There's unsummon as well. There's a few variations of this card, but this one's probably like the strongest. Not that the 1 life matters a whole lot with what we're doing, but
Theoretically could, but
yeah.
can also be a downside if you're trying to use it to bounce your own stuff. But,
Yeah. But we wanted to cover at least one of these effects to kind of talk about why we don't think they're really what you need to be doing. We've talked about it. We've repeated it a ton. Like, we just have so many other removal options that are broader in scope, similarly costed, or not that much more expensive, and do so much more that playing these like narrower pieces of removal, while they're better when they're doing the thing against that specific type of creature, the flexibility is just so much more important when you're talking about sitting down at a table with 3 other random decks every round. You never know what to expect, so it's better
Yeah,
to have something that hits everything.
the opportunity cost is high on a card like this, I would say,
Yeah,
for Gretchen specifically.
yeah.
Um,
So I have it in the D tier. It's not really what we want to be doing. Other decks
I
may
agree.
value it more, but it's just not what we need to be worried about. So,
Yeah.
um, I think the last card we need to talk about in the interaction section is Winds of Rebuke, which similar to what we're talking about. So, another bounce
Mm-hmm.
spell targets any on-land permanent. Um, this one's
And this one
unique.
doubles.
Yeah, so this one mills everyone as well. So it's a win con of sorts if you're looping things. Um, because you can return your own stuff to your hand when you're comboing. So you always have a target. Um,
Yeah.
it's just not. Again, it's like the mill isn't really relevant outside of when we're going for a win though. So it falls into that Sapphire Charm category for me, where like yeah, it can do the thing where we combo and like it does something outside of combo, but it just doesn't do it as well as the other things we have. So I'm not super interested in it. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's a fine option if you're wanting, if you want more of your interaction to double as a win condition and be less versatile like mid game. But yeah, like I think I prefer Sapphire Charm over this.
yeah,
Um,
there. Are,
Especially because like some decks want to be milled. Feels kind of bad mid game.
yeah, that's fair. And so I think it's something where you could play it and it's fine. But in terms of it becomes what you prioritize basically, like all of the kind of tier C cards. It's just if this is what you prioritize, great. Um, though I mean, because it's only milling 2 cards one time, but like there is still also like a potential cost of milling something that's really important to what you want to do, and losing a piece potentially to like graveyard hay that otherwise would have been safe, right? And that's corner case, but like it, those little things matter when we have so many options to choose from. Um, Minimizing the downsides of each one is like something you can choose to like really get nitpicky on at this point with just the options we have. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you have to choose to play this over any of the other 2 mana non-land bounces we have, like Blink of an Eye, um, or Echoing Truth, things like that. So yeah, it's really a preference, and my preference is not to play it, but
same.
it's playable
Yeah.
at the very least.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think here we're gonna stop for a bit and record the rest of this later. So this will be part one for you guys. We still have some other cards,
Yeah.
believe it or not, to go through.
So yeah,
But
well,
thank you guys for watching. If you sat through
mm,
the entire, if you care about Gretchen enough to sit through this whole thing, um, if there are any cards we missed, let us know so that we can get them added in before we drop part two.
sounds good.
Thank you for joining me, Bobby. I think that covers pretty much everything I need to talk about for this one.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, and yeah, I guess we'll be back with part 2 and start on the land auras there. So.